I was 16 then. It happened in the summer of 1833. I lived in Moscow with my parents. They had taken a country house for the summer near the Kaluga Gate, facing the Neskutchny Gardens. I was preparing for the university, but did not work much and was in no hurry. No one interfered with my freedom. I did what I liked, especially after parting with my last tutor, a Frenchman who had never been able to get used to the idea that he had fallen like a bomb, into Russia, and would lie sluggishly in bed with an expression of exasperation on his face for days together. My father treated me with careless kindness. My mother scarcely noticed me, though she had no children except me. Other cares completely absorbed her. My father, a man still young and very handsome, had married her from mercenary considerations. She was 10 years older than he. My mother led a melancholy life. She was forever agitated, jealous and angry, but not in my father's presence. She was very much afraid of him, and he was severe, cold, and distant in his behavior. I have never seen a man more elaborately serene, self-confident, and commanding. I shall never forget the first weeks I spent at the country house. The weather was magnificent. We left town on the 9th of May, on St. Nicholas's Day. I used to walk about in our garden, in the Neskutchny Gardens, and beyond the town gates. I would take some book with me, Kaidanov's course, for instance, but I rarely looked into it, and more often than anything declaimed verses aloud. I knew a great deal of poetry by heart. My blood was in a ferment and my heart ached, so sweetly and absurdly. I was all hope and anticipation, was a little frightened of something, and full of wonder at everything, and was on the tiptoe of expectation. My imagination played continually, fluttering rapidly about the same fancies, like martins about a bell tower at dawn. I dreamed, was sad, even wept. But through the tears and through the sadness, inspired by a musical verse, or the beauty of evening, shot up like grass in spring the delicious sense of youth and effervescent life. I had a horse to ride. I used to saddle it myself and set off alone for long rides, break into a rapid gallop and fancy myself a knight at a tournament. How gaily the wind whistled in my ears. Or turning my face towards the sky, I would absorb its shining radiance and blew into my soul, then opened wide to welcome it. I remembered that at that time the image of woman, the vision of love, scarcely ever rose in definite shape in my brain. But in all I thought, in all I felt, lay hidden a half-conscious, shame-faced presentiment of something new, unutterably sweet, feminine. This presentiment, this expectation, permeated my whole being. I breathed in it. It coursed through my veins with every drop of blood. It was destined to be soon fulfilled. The place, where we settled for the summer, consisted of a wooden manor house with columns and 2 small lodges. In the lodge on the left there was a tiny factory for the manufacture of cheap wallpapers. I had more than once strolled that way to look at about a dozen thin and disheveled boys with greasy smicks and worn faces, who were perpetually jumping onto wooden levers that pressed down the square blocks of the press, and so by the weight of their feeble bodies struck off the variegated patterns of the wallpapers. The lodge on the right stood empty, and was to let. One day, 3 weeks after the 9th of May, the blinds in the windows of this lodge were drawn up. Women's faces appeared at them. Some family had installed themselves in it. I remember the same day at dinner, my mother inquired of the butler who were our new neighbors, and hearing the name of the Princess Zasyakin, first observed with some respect, "Ah, a princess," and then added, "A poor one, I suppose?" They arrived in 3 hired flies, the butler remarked deferentially, as he handed a dish. They don't keep their own carriage, and the furniture's of the poorest. Ah, replied my mother, so much the better. My father gave her a chilly glance. She was silent. Certainly the Princess Zosiakin could not be a rich woman. The lodge she had taken was so dilapidated and small and low-pitched that people, even moderately well off in the world, would hardly have consented to occupy it. At the time, however, all this went in at one ear and out at the other. The princely title had very little effect on me. I had just been reading Schiller's Robbers. I was in the habit of wandering about our garden every evening on the lookout for rooks. I had long cherished a hatred for those wary, sly, and rapacious birds. On the day of which I have been speaking, I went as usual into the garden, and after patrolling all the walks without success, the rooks knew me, and merely cawed spasmodically at a distance. I chanced to go close to the low fence which separated our domain from the narrow strip of garden stretching beyond the lodge to the right, and belonging to it. I will stop today as the story goes on. The next part will be brought soon.